Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this sunny, warming day. We're very excited that spring is finally here in the state of Wisconsin. At least we hope it's here for the continuation of the next month or so before summer arrives. And it's going to be a different environment. And we are pleased that we were able to put the band together again for the SIOR Wisconsin signature event, the Industrial Real Estate, What is Coming Next. We had this event originally scheduled for March 12th, which is only 2 short months ago. Seems like an eternity. We were one of the first live business events that ended up pulling the plug because of the COVID outbreak. The night before, the NBA had suspended the season. And at this point, the Milwaukee Bucks probably should have been playing in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. And what we are very excited, though, we wanted to have the opportunity to potentially get everybody in the room again as a networking event. It was obvious that that was not going to happen. We were able to work with our esteemed panelists to get them to line up their calendars for this afternoon. And that day, the topics we were going to discuss as we started 2020 industrial real estate was obviously one of the best performing asset classes. Heading into 2020, everybody thought the economy was going to grow at a pretty slow and steady pace again. And then COVID happened, and the world has fundamentally changed in the last 10 weeks. And for this panel in particular, a lot of the topics that we were going to talk about on that day are even much more relevant, especially on the food delivery and supply chain side. A lot of analysts are projecting that what was occurring in that space has been pulled forward anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So we are excited to have an incredible panel of industry experts and some great content to cover today. My name is Jeff Hoffman. I'm with Cushman & Wakefield Berkey, the past chapter president of SIOR Wisconsin. I will be moderating the panel today. We would like to thank our sponsors who have stuck with us through this process. Obviously, as a sponsor in our industry, if you're a sponsor, you want to have the opportunity to meet people that are doing deals in the room, develop that personal relationship. And we've all adapted our businesses to do video conferencing. And we truly appreciate the commitment of our sponsors. We're going to hear from Michael Kleber, the leasing director of Zilber, in a pre-recorded message here. We also want to thank Landmark Credit Union, FCL Builders, and Link Industrial.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Michael Kleber, Director of Industrial Leasing for Zilber Property Group. ZBG is the Commercial Real Estate Investment and Development Division of Milwaukee-based Zilber Limited. As presenting sponsor, I would like to personally thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I would like to also thank Tracy Johnson and the SIOR and CARW organizations for their ongoing dedication to strengthening our industry and making events like this possible. As we continue to navigate the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis in our industry, today's discussion on the state of the industrial market couldn't be more timely. Although we cannot have expected the future to arrive so soon, we are making the necessary adjustments to address the day-to-day challenges, while identifying opportunities for growth and continued success. We are hopeful that as we move forward from these unprecedented times, our industry will come out stronger than ever. Our ZBG industrial team has continued its efforts to secure a healthy development pipeline for 2020. We have recently announced 2 industrial projects totaling 160,000 square feet in Salem Business Park, located in western Kenosha County, which will break ground at the end of this month, as well as a partnership with the Forest County Potawatomi for the redevelopment of the former Dairyland Greyhound Park in Kenosha County. Although we're in challenging times, as a solution-based group, we remain dedicated to moving forward and identifying new opportunities. We're excited to hear the insight of today's panelists. Stay healthy, stay safe, everyone.
Thanks again to Zilber for being the premier sponsor for this event, and thank you again to FCL, Landmark, and Link. Now, on to the main event. The panelists that we have here today are best in class for their particular industry segments. What I'm going to do here is introduce each person, their name and their company, and then we're going to go to the panelists themselves and listen to them of their roles and their background. We have with us today Tricia Braun, who is the Director of Client Strategies at J.P. Cullen, Rita Williams, Director of Economic Development at Kroger, Rob Damrat, Senior Vice President, Link Industrial, and Jamie Hess of WOW Logistics, Senior VP of Logistics and Supply Chain Planning. All right, could we start with Tricia? And Tricia, a little bit of background on yourself and J.P. Cullen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. Again, Tricia Braun, Director of Client Strategies at J.P. Cullen. J.P. Cullen is a fifth-generation family-owned Wisconsin company. We have offices in Madison, Janesville, and right here in Milwaukee. We are a full-service general construction management firm and self-perform the majority of our services, everything except for the MEP and fire protection. In my role, I really work to help our clients be more successful outside of construction, whether it's in the pre-construction and planning process, or even to help identify resources to make their projects more financially feasible or justify the ROI with them. Prior to coming to Cullen in November of 2019, I was in economic development for over 20 years. And in my last role, I was the Chief Operating Officer at the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Oh, I think Jeff wanted us to add what is keeping us safe and sort of sane these days. And I think we all agreed that that's not really an easy answer. But I would say probably technology and being home with the dogs and the kids and having to spend some extra time with them and appreciating that during this time.
No, thank you, Tricia, and thank you for bringing up your role at WEDC, because one of the questions that we're going to talk about today is the labor component. Rita, going on to you, could you make a brief introduction of yourself and your company?
Sure, absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Wanted to introduce my role. So I am the Director of Economic Development. So I lead the Kroger and the family of companies. So we operate in over 38 states and we have over 24 banners. So you may know us as Harris Teeter, Fred Meyer, Kroger, Rouse, and I can continue to name different banners. We also have our manufacturing operations. We have over 34 manufacturing facilities, and our logistics operations, we have over 36 logistics operations. So I'm really excited to talk about WOW Logistics with Jamie. So glad to be on the panel with her. And so what we do is we seek economic development assistance for all our key projects and our key strategies. And then like Tricia, I think what is keeping me sane is technology and learning technology. But I have to say yesterday, I was so happy when I got my Kroger pickup order and I didn't have to go to the store and everything was perfect and I got 100% of all what I wanted. That's keeping me sane right now, so.
Excellent. Moving on to Rob.
Thanks, Jeff. Name is Rob Damrat. I work at Link Industrial. Link Industrial is Blackstone's industrial operating platform. And then my role within the company is I'm part of a larger team that oversees the Midwest. And then my team specifically within that group helps oversee Illinois, Wisconsin, and Kansas City. To answer the what's keeping me sane question, absolutely nothing. But certainly what is helping is knowing that both myself and my teammates are in this together, and much like everyone else in the industry, we're in this together. So knowing that I'm not alone, and certainly spending time with the family helps.
That's great, Rob. And Rob forewarned us that his 3-year-old might hop in and video bomb us here, so just be prepared. Going on to Jamie. Jamie, introduction, please.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Jamie Hess. I'm the VP of Supply Chain Solutions at WOW Logistics. WOW stands for Warehousing of Wisconsin, but we currently warehouse outside of the state, so our name was shortened. We have 27 different warehouses, mostly in Wisconsin. We also have some locations in Idaho, Minnesota, and we're currently onboarding a new location in the Seattle area, which is very exciting. I've been with WOW for about 8 years, but I've been in warehousing and supply chain for 16 years. And with WOW, what I'm currently doing is I oversee our engineering group And most of our operations, we've got transportation operations, contract operations, and we have a real estate business unit. And I work very closely with all of those business units to design and implement new facilities.
All right, that is great backgrounds in everybody, and for the audience, I think you can see why we were so excited to be able to pull this panel together here. So the format of the event here is we're going to ask panelists an individual question. We're encouraging the additional panelists that have not been asked the specific question to chime in with a thought. Again, we turn to industry leaders such as yourselves to provide us insights through these times, and kind of how we should be positioning the business. The good thing about the industrial side of the economy is while we have challenges, we certainly have much less challenges than some of the other commercial real estate food groups out there. Speaking of food, why don't we start with Kroger? Obviously, 10 weeks ago, we were going to be discussing the new fulfillment center that was announced for Pleasant Prairie that Kroger was going to do. These are new prototypes that they're building out across the U.S. I believe they want to do 20. They just announced their 6th, which was in Pleasant Prairie. They've got a relationship with a robotics provider out of the UK called Ocado. And we were actually going to share a video of what these warehouses do. We tested it, and it was not going to flow through too well on the Zoom video here, but from some takeaway material that'll be emailed to you afterwards. And you can also Google search it when we're done. Google search Ocado robotic warehouses. It is incredible. Rita, could you please describe what you're doing in Pleasant Prairie and what the business model looks like?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so my discussion was a little bit different 10 weeks ago, and our company has changed significantly since then. But our strategic partnership with Ocado and how we are changing how America shops and how they eat has not changed. So we had announced our partnership in May of 2018. And since then, we have been seeking actually locations in each region so we can build out our ecosystem of our seamless end-to-end solution for our customers. So we've been working on this for quite some time over the last 2 years. And really, I think the change of this COVID and the discussion that we're having today was the impetus of how do we roll this out. And so now I think the challenges are how quickly do we roll these out, these robotic fulfillment centers. So our partnership with Ocado, it is really our long-term sustainable solution of how we continue to service our customers in the regions that we operate in, and even in regions that we don't operate in, where we can provide fresh food choices for our customers. So in Wisconsin, we are very excited. We've partnered with Wisconsin over it's been over 6 months now. And they were great to work with from start to finish for site selection and then permitting. And so we're very happy to be in Wisconsin and have the robotic fulfillment center here.
So you mentioned that the business model has obviously been impacted to the positive side. What have some of the challenges have been in your perspective over the last 10 weeks?
Yeah, so over the last 10 weeks, being the essential business, so we are a major retailer, but we also are a major pharmacy. So, we are frontline workers in our retail business operations, our pharmacy, and our supply chain, and our distribution. And then we're also the front end work on the manufacturing. So we hit all segments of every frontline worker. So it's been a bit of a challenge, during these unprecedented times. Our chairman, Rodney McMullen, had been working through, how do we all get through this together? How do we keep our associates safe? How do we keep our customers safe? And how do we roll this out? So we have had many changes in our existing stores. We limit the number of people coming in. We have safety measures. So, our traditional store operation looks so different today. And then our online and our delivery we actually have a deliver to home, which a lot of people wasn't aware of. It was actually ship to home. So our ship business had increased significantly. You can go on your Kroger app and just purchase items and have it shipped directly to your house. So we've seen a big uptick in that. So our industry is changing and is continuing to change. And I think, Jeff, as you share the Ocado video, also going to send a link to our blueprint. So Kroger had put forth a blueprint that we're rolling out. We're partnering with the federal, state, and local of how do we roll out successfully? How do we open up businesses? And what have we learned being really in the forefront of all this throughout the last, 10 plus weeks?
Excellent. So we briefly talked about labor and the essential labor, and I think this facility in Pleasant Prairie, at least what was reported in the media, is about 400 jobs. Tricia, I want to turn to you because on March 12th, the conversation we were going to have regarding the labor market was we can't find labor anywhere. The industrial occupiers we talked to, warehousers, manufacturers, you name it, it was the tightest labor market we've ever seen. And obviously 10 short weeks later, it's a disaster, right? It's a disaster out there right now. So as you're surveying the labor market and your background and some of the conversations you're having with some of the clients that you're planning projects for, what is your perception of where the labor market's going to head over the next several months?
Yeah, good question, Jeff. And actually, I was on a call yesterday with the manufacturer in Wisconsin that we had been working with on the talent attraction efforts when I was at WEDC, and I asked him that exact question. One thing I think we need to be careful of is this is hopefully a shorter term problem, and not lose sight of what we were working towards for a longer term solution for workforce, because our demographic shifts are not going to change. Our aging workforce is not going to change. So I think longer term, we still have to be prepared to be able to supply our businesses with the workforce that they're going to need. And in the short term, I think the question is going to be, do we still have the right people to fill the jobs that are going to be available? So some of the production jobs, some of the fulfillment center, and how can we be working, whether it's economic development, workforce agencies, just industry partners, to help people pivot, and that's some of the discussions that are occurring around, kind of the temporary unemployment benefits and the impact that that's going to have on the challenges to find workforce. Those are conversations to have at a higher level. But I think at least in the short term, we have to be thinking, how can we be flexible with the labor force that's going to be available with the increased unemployment, but then also preparing for long term. So it's not really a clear answer there, Jeff, I'm sorry, but I think that the short end of it, or the bottom line of it, is that we are going to have additional labor available in the short term, but then we use that time to be planning for what we'll need to supply our businesses in the future.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting how that plays out. Just people in the service industry, in particular, food and beverage and hospitality. A lot of people are predicting that's going to build back up much more slowly. So are some of those people going to start seeking jobs in fulfillment centers and manufacturing plants? So just that to me has been the most fascinating change in the past 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Going on to Rob. You mentioned Rob has a young family that keeps him up at night, but his company, Link Industrial, which is Blackstone's arm for their industrial real estate holdings, has been on an acquisition tear for the last couple of years, and they have catapulted up to the #2 industrial landlord in the U.S. Just last year alone, they bought GLP Colony, and right before the event we were supposed to have in March, the end of February, they bought a 3.7 million square foot Wisconsin portfolio from Centerpoint Properties Trust, immediately catapulting themselves up to one of the top landlords in Wisconsin. Rob, how have you been able to manage that breakneck speed of expansion, and how do you do that with your operations?
Sure. So breakneck, without a doubt. 2.5 years ago, as a firm, we were 70 million square feet. Today, we're 400 million square feet. You named all the big acquisitions, and maintaining operational efficiency, leasing velocity, while also absorbing all this real estate in a record-breaking amount of time. We've been super fortunate in that with a lot of these both entity transactions and portfolio acquisitions, a lot of the folks from either Colony or GLP, certainly Gramercy and Gateway, the company I was with 2.5 years ago, a lot of the folks stayed on. And so there's been a lot of sort of property memory that continued on with every acquisition. And then beyond that, we've got, we've built what I believe to be a world-class operating platform, both back office and front office, third-party management, in-house property management, construction folks, all the things you don't see when you're at the property. You see the leasing agent, you see the asset manager now and again make an appearance. What you don't see is the folks behind the scenes. And what's made this transaction so seamless is really all those people, coupled with the folks that stayed on and allowed us to continue the memory and the history of the assets along the way. Jeff, you're muted.
Thank you, Rob. I was saying thank you, Rob, and I'm thanking you again for letting me know I was muted. Jamie, turning to you. Supply chain and delivering of product has been essential to keep, in my opinion, Americans at somewhat ease. I said if you wanted to really accelerate the tenuousness of the situation here, is cut off our food supply chain in particular and have some complications. But we've heard about challenges of the supply chain effectively flowing. We've heard about more and more even warehouse workers that are getting sick, some of the concerns of the trucking community. Can you kind of give us an overview of what you see happening right now in supply chain management?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as an essential business, it was when all of this started happening in the industry. I mean, it became a super high focus for us to try to make sure that our employees were staying safe and healthy, so that we could continue operating our facilities and moving products through the supply chain for our customers. Being that we're not a manufacturer, we're a service organization, our primary asset is those people. So, we want them to stay healthy, certainly because, we care about our teammates, but also because we have a duty to our customers to keep things flowing through the supply chain. So our immediate focus was implementing procedures to increase employee awareness, keep our employees safe, keep our facilities clean and safe, and have a lot of frequent and open communications with our customers to make sure that we understood where they were forecasting their business to be, and we could adapt quickly. We have done a lot of things that I'm sure other people have, and a couple other people have spoken about, 6-foot distancing rules. We do temperature checks and self-reporting at every facility. We wear face masks when we're at a facility or when we're at a common area in our offices. We're using a lot of video calls and technology, just like other people are too, and sanitizing procedures. And, it's been really interesting, the differences that our customers have experienced throughout this whole thing. We talked a lot about, different food type of distribution. Well, in certain areas, when you get further down in the supply chain, you're either going towards a retail or a food service type of distribution model. And the impact of the food service distribution model has been extreme. And luckily, a lot of our clients in the food industry were balanced enough that they could divert things, through a retail channel or find other ways to keep that product moving. But, we had a couple customers that were heavily reliant on food service distribution, and they were really struggling through those times. And I think this has really shone a light on diversification and some of those risks for a lot of our customers. And I think going forward, you'll start to see more of that diversification, so that you'll start to see more food service distributors having different channels in the supply chain in order to mitigate that risk going forward.
Going back to Rob, you have hundreds of industrial tenants in your portfolio. I guess, what is the general sense of the economy right now, at least with your industrial tenants? How are you feeling right now as we head into June and the third month of the coronavirus crisis?
Sure. So just to take a half step back and give everyone some context, Link oversees roughly 400 million square feet on behalf of Blackstone. The Midwest as a whole has roughly 91 million of those square feet. And then my team and I, between Illinois and Wisconsin specifically, there's roughly 35 million square feet there. And then Wisconsin, taking it down a little bit further, is 5 million of those square feet. I'm glad you asked, Jeff. I was talking to my team earlier today, and I was hoping to turn this segment into John Krasinski's Some Good News format. They asked me very strongly not to do that, and so I will stick to just the facts and sort of the positive momentum we're seeing in the market. Using COVID as the COVID timeframe, I think what people are probably most interested in. March 1 until today, our team has completed roughly 400,000 square feet of renewal and expansion transactions across Illinois and Wisconsin. This next stat I think is pretty exciting. It's really only come to sort of light over the last week or two. We are currently tracking, actively trading LOI paper and or lease paper on roughly 2 million square feet of renewal transactions. And I want to be very clear when I say renewal transactions, those are folks that have not put their business, specifically real estate decisions, on hold as a result of COVID. That's 2 million square feet of folks who are either looking to commit to 3 years, 5 years, in some cases 1 year, a couple years out, early renewals, expansions in some case. And then I'm happy to report as recently as yesterday, after a 45-day drought, we had a new prospect looking to lease 100,000 square feet in one of our vacancies come through, looking to commit to somewhere between 3 and 5 years of term. I will tell you, I'll give a very quick soundbite here just so that everyone can have a laugh at my expense. 45-day drought. I get dressed. I get in my stereotypical Tahoe. I get out to the property. Couldn't be more excited about the prospect. I've got my leasing pitch down, and the guy wouldn't make eye contact with me. Everywhere I walked, he walked the other way. I couldn't figure out. Usually a lot of my antics work. And 25 minutes in, I realized that I was so excited that A, I was wearing a face mask, but B, I had forgotten to take off my sunglasses and my hat. And so finally, after 25 minutes, I had to take it off, and we kicked it off. An RFP followed, and we're hopefully trending towards a deal. But after 45 days of drought, sort of pointing to the picture that, we're a little rusty at this point after sitting at home for all this time. But some good news, 400,000 square feet of deals done, 2 million of tracking. And probably the biggest news is a new 100,000 square foot requirement looking to commit to term with credit behind it.
So as an established landlord, you're in an environment, what it appears that a lot of your existing tenants, if they had lease rolls, that they're hunkering down, they're going to commit to sticking with you. They're not necessarily out looking for new or different space. Would that be an accurate summary?
I would say that's fair. And sort of if you want to put it into two buckets, sort of a little bit of a recap of what I just said. 90 to 95% of our activity at this point is renewal focused.
Yeah.
And it's folks, going with an uncertainty theme in the market. You're probably more likely to stay where you are, if even for 18 to 24 months, rather than take on a new opportunity, a new build out or most space, at least at the moment today.
Got it. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, and Rob, just to follow up on that, Jeff, I wanted to add to Rob's, where he's continuing to have customers come in and look at lease facilities. We see that in our business now, even though, we've been working remotely from home. We've been partnering with so many different industries to find real estate and to extend our leases or buy new properties. So I think there is, once this unfolds, I really feel like there's so much that's going on kind of behind the scenes that, there's going to be some uptick. So I just wanted to echo that. All your hard work, Rob, over the last 45 days. All good.
Hey, Rita, thanks for throwing on my Some Good News segment. Yeah. That was great.
Actually, to tack onto that as well, even, I'm in the office right now, but I'm one of maybe 8 people in a 12,000 square foot building. But, despite being all spread out, being at home, we've been working on design of new facilities. I've got a 100,000 square foot facility in the Fox Valley area that we're designing and trying to get implemented. Another 100,000 square feet in the northwestern Chicago suburbs. So there's definitely movement, and it's interesting too, because again, depending on what part of the supply chain and what kind of products you're looking at, a lot of our customers needed more space during this time. We had inventories piling up for certain product types, and especially on the dairy side, which we're very heavy in, we had a lot of requests for freezer capacity. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of existing freezer capacity in our network right now, but that's been the hot button lately is, I need somewhere to put this, whether it's butter, cheese, whatever it is, it's not moving as quickly. The milk's still coming in, right? The cows need to be milked. They don't know what's going on. So the milk has to go somewhere, and all those products are starting to build up. So our demand specifically for freezer capacity has been overwhelming.
Now that's great news. Tricia, I want to turn to you because on the construction side, obviously it's a long-term CapEx for a company, high dollar. What are you seeing with your customers that you were bidding projects on or talking about coming out of the ground in 2020? What's your general feeling out there?
I think so far, if you just bucket it in the next 12 months, projects that were slated to go and others that were in the pre-design or the planning phase, the vast majority of those are continuing to proceed. In the industrial side, as kind of going along the lines of what everybody is saying here, some of our clients have even asked us to accelerate the time frame or have added mini projects so that they can increase production during this time while they figure out a larger, longer term plan to sustain production capabilities, particularly in food manufacturing, and then some of the supply chain tenants or operators that go along with that, packaging, logistics, et cetera. I think longer term, we're going to start seeing even more manufacturing projects that are going to have to increase their production without increasing people and body count just for COVID and safety reasons. So I think we're bullish in that area. Or our healthcare projects are continuing to proceed. So we've been grateful to see that. I'm kind of skipping ahead beyond your 12 months question, Jeff, but I think, for those of us in construction that have publicly funded projects, that's probably where the biggest question marks are going to be for us is what are those going to look like, 12 to 24 months down the road, if resources are being shifted or diverted, how the federal assistance that's coming in is going to impact that. So I think that's probably the area where the most question marks exist in our world.
Got it. Rita, I want to go back to your comment about the site selection process in landing in Wisconsin. Can you talk a little bit about, just as you're deploying these fulfillment centers, what are some of the key attributes in a market that you're looking for, whether it's labor, transportation, population density? What are some of the key attributes that you're looking for, and kind of specifically, how did you end up in Pleasant Prairie?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we continue to roll out our partnership with Ocado, we look at how do we build the ecosystem in the United States. We first currently look at our footprint today and where our current distribution centers are. So this robotic fulfillment center really disrupts the whole supply chain in that all the groceries will be then delivered to the fulfillment center. And then from there, it'll be picked for a customer's order and then delivered. So today, all the product is shipped to our distribution centers and then transported to the stores, put on the shelf, picked off the shelf, and then delivered to the customer. So as we look at how do we select these regions, we look at our current footprint. We also look at where the customer demand is. So home delivery is new. I mean, in the last 10 weeks, there is over a 20% increase in online ordering. And, most about 10% of our customers have never even opened up the app to do online ordering. And now it's an everyday thing. Now they don't know how to go back to the grocery store. So, like I mentioned before, we saw this coming. Now it's, for the future, where COVID has escalated us 2 years ahead of what we expected. We saw this, in the future of how do we look at our customer base? How do we look at ordering online and then delivering in our supply chain? To get back to your question, why do we choose Pleasant Prairie? So we have, our stores in the Wisconsin market. We had acquired Roundy's, and it's a great banner for us, and it really is a good complement to our other business operations. We actually did a project in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with our fulfillment center several years ago, and expanding that. So this is definitely a complement to our business operations and our long-term strategy with our partnership with Ocado.
That's great. We're glad to have you here with that investment in the state of Wisconsin. Jamie, I want to turn to you. You had brought up freezer cooler. And so on the industrial real estate side, especially in light of what we're seeing with the food delivery business, there are several of the large brokerage firms are projecting to developers that there is going to be a need for roughly 100 million square feet of freezer cooler space over the next decade. So I want to get your opinion because WOW, in addition to being an operator, is an active real estate investor and owner. If it's that big of a need, what are some of the challenges for developing, say, a speculative freezer and cooler building? And do you think developers are going to start constructing those types of facilities?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that, food grade space and specifically cooler and freezer, it is in big demand, and it will continue to be now and in the future too. But, they're high cost buildings to operate. I don't know many 3PLs that, are going to build a freezer on a whim, the build it and they will come mentality. I really don't see that happening. I think most 3PLs, WOW included, are more likely to do a purpose-built building, especially if it's a freezer that's for a long-term obligation for a customer, likely paired with a services agreement in our case. And I think that, maybe in the last, say, 10 years or so, I think that's becoming more normal. And I see the markets turning and moving more towards long-term leases, whereas maybe in the past, one could argue that it was the customers that had the upper hand, and they really didn't need to do any long-term obligations on their space and things like that. I think nowadays, capacity is not as readily available. I think investors are less willing to invest their capital if they don't have a matching obligation. So I think more and more customers are becoming willing to commit to longer terms. I mean, the last two deals that we signed, one being a renewal of 450,000 square feet and services, a new one being 285,000 square feet with services. Both of those agreements are 10 years. That's kind of unheard of in the 3PL market. So, we have a lease and a services agreement for 10 years, and we've signed 2 of those in the last 6 months. So I think that customers are becoming more comfortable with that. So with that trend and the demand for that food grade and freezer space, especially being high, I would see more purpose-built buildings coming up rather than spec buildings. That's what I would think.
So if you personally inherited $15 million and you had a prime site in the downtown Loop, Chicago market, would you personally, with your own money, construct a speculative freezer cooler building?
The thing is I don't think I would have to without a commitment from a customer. Yeah. I think I could easily get a commitment. So I wouldn't without a matching obligation from a customer, because in this market, I don't have to do it spec.
Interesting.
I think what I just heard is 3PLs are willing to commit to more than 3 years a term, which is great news. Great news for everybody.
Well, if we're sharing tricks, Rob, I'm going to turn to you. So Rob, we're hopeful that all your tenants are performing, and we've heard that industrial, I think Prologis indicated they're at about 95%. A lot of the industrial REITs are suggesting that they've had very good rent collection so far. Turning to the landlord-tenant relationships, I want to ask, and if you can't give tricks of the trade, we understand, but if I represent a tenant, or somebody that's listening is a tenant that is having some financial difficulties, some legitimate financial difficulties because of COVID, and if they haven't approached you already, what is an appropriate way for them to approach you? And can you share any instances where a tenant has come to you and you've been able to give due consideration, and some of the advice you could give to a tenant on what they can expect in dealing with a landlord?
Sure. So like anything else in life and in industrial leasing, if you come to a landlord with a solution, not just a problem, you automatically have their attention. If it's 2 or 3 months today, repaid over some period of time with a term commitment on the back end, those sort of requests get kicked to I wouldn't say get kicked to the top of the list, but certainly get our attention. Our process internally has been, if a rent relief request comes in, whether from a tenant or through a member of the brokerage community, we automatically send a questionnaire. That questionnaire, fairly lengthy. Not going to sugarcoat that piece of it. It includes past financials, future financials, information about PPP loan status. That then results in a credit review process, a phone call. It doesn't happen overnight. It usually takes 2 to 3 weeks. And I think if I'm giving advice, it's as the brokerage community is partnering with their clients and seeking rent relief today, a much easier conversation is had if it's approached with a solution-based, as opposed to I just need help and period. Not to say that's not warranted and we won't work with those tenants. It's much easier to get approved internally when there's a partnership between a tenant and landlord, where we get some value on the back end of the lease, some sort of a repayment for relief in exchange for relief today.
So Rob, what you're telling me is if you had a Fortune 5 company with just released pretty solid earnings with a letter that stated, "Dear Sir or Madam, we value our personal relationship with you, and we are unilaterally requesting a 30% reduction in rent," that probably wouldn't go very far with you.
You forgot the use of the word unprecedented times.
Yes.
In that email. No, it wouldn't go over well. I wouldn't say it wouldn't go over well, or it wouldn't go over poorly. I would simply put on my deal hat and try to turn that into an opportunity. That in some cases is welcomed by those larger, more credit favored tenants. Great. I'll extend for 2 years in exchange for 3 months free today. I'll extend for my expiration date is 18 months, 2 years away anyway. In some cases, I have, for those larger tenants, I've suggested term on the back end. I've been called a couple names over the last 45, 60 days, but no, we are open to those conversations, Jeff. It just in most cases, I'd like to turn it into a partnership between a tenant and a landlord.
And maybe a bit of advice: if they're going to stress personal relationship, to at least address the person by their first name and not a
helpful.
Sir.
Unprecedented.
Yes. Tricia, I want to turn to you. The construction pipeline. So the construction pricing, we can all acknowledge, has been under inflationary pressures for compounding over the last several years, which has led to industrial buildings costing $80 to $100 a square foot to build. In your opinion, do you think construction pricing is going to soften a little bit, just because you could argue that there's going to be fewer projects in the market and competition is going to get much tougher? What do you think is going to happen with pricing and construction over the next 12 months?
I think for the most part, probably material pricing will go down, especially with oil prices as low as they are right now. I guess the risk, and not the risk in saying that, or the challenge that could happen, is if some of the smaller suppliers either aren't able to operate or go to business, or aren't able to provide those, and so the demand is there, so that would keep the prices high. But I think for the most part on the material side, we're likely to see the costs go down. For the labor, I think we're going to see less turnover for the construction companies that are continuing to operate, and so hopefully that will eliminate some of the labor cost increases that we've all had to take on to keep up with the projects and the demand in the construction world. As far as overall contract prices, I would imagine there's going to be a little bit of a buyer's market, but I know a lot of the construction companies, especially here in Wisconsin, were pretty healthy going into this, or able to ride out a reduction in some of their pipeline, but I still think there probably will be some competitive savings there, I would say.
Yeah, I actually heard an interesting thought process from more of a national contractor last week that suggested, with the tightening of immigration into the country based on the coronavirus, that there is a large segment of the available labor force that's not going to be working in the United States. and said by nature, even with less projects out there, that you're going to see pricing, at least on the labor side, pretty stable, if not still increasing, just because labor was a challenge already and they didn't think it was going to get any better. So I heard about the same thing from a national contractor. So want to turn to the outlook. We're in the moment right now, the last 10 weeks that I think we all wished was a dream. Well, for Kroger, it might have been a dream. It helped your project quite a bit, Rita. Now, I'm joking. I'm sure you wouldn't have wished this upon your worst enemy to launch the Ocado brand. But economic outlook. What do you feel personally? What are you talking about in your companies when we get out of the back end, say 2021? What do you think the market looks like when we return to normal here? Let's start with Jamie.
Well, I mean, I think from a supply chain perspective, let's talk transportation first. That's always a market that's got some volatility. So you'll always find some ebbs and flows. But I feel like, in the past 10 years or so of supply chain, there was so much focus on technology, big data, visibility, and in the midst of that, I think everybody, kind of became, or they took for granted the fact that goods physically moved from point A to point B, and it was just something that happened, and everybody took it for granted. And I think now that we're, really feeling the stress of, what's happening in our economy and in our markets, I think that in the coming months and years, I think that focus is going to continue to move to that physical layer of how goods get delivered through the supply chain and get to the consumer. And I think you'll see more and more creative methods, just like, Kroger has been working on, which is excellent. And it's really become a competitive advantage to figure out how you can fulfill your demand to your customers in creative ways. And, I love Amazon, and there's probably a Prime package sitting on my doorstep as we speak, but I will say that Amazon has ruined us. And I say that tongue in cheek, because what I'm saying is I think they're a great powerhouse of an organization, and I order from them quite a bit personally, but, as consumers, we all have unrealistic expectations of how quickly it takes to get our stuff to where we need it, right, or where we want it. So if I can't have it in 2 days, well, then that's a service failure. And I think, that mentality is already permeated the supply chain. And I think the unprecedented times that we've seen lately have really put an extra emphasis on that. And I think you'll see a lot more creativity come out of the supply chain and facility design and strategy. And I know personally from our side of it, we very quickly put our software developers on developing new software so that the interaction between truck drivers and those working in our warehouses could be limited. So we created an online application where drivers can self-check in to our warehouse, and then we can have conversations, via their smartphone. They're texting back and forth to our office clerk so that they don't have to physically come into the warehouse. We don't have to physically hand paperwork. So there's been a lot of interesting developments from that side too, and I think that you'll continue to see those kinds of creative developments.
Moving on to Rita. Rita, what do you think the market looks like when it stabilizes?
Yeah, it's hard to predict consumer behavior, right? And as Jimmy mentioned, our initial thought was we order something, it's delivered directly to us. So I mean, as we come out of COVID, I think our customers are going to change. There's going to be some mindset change. It's hard to predict how extreme that's going to be. But what I do see, this most significant change is technology. I think technology, this is going to be the technology revolution. This is the impetus that will change, and it's changed our work style. So you look at how we as a country started to work differently, and the whole technology, and we've never touched technology. So I think the technology revolution is really hit here. But I also workforce, and I know, Tricia, you mentioned workforce at the beginning of the panel, and I just think that's so critical. It's so important to talk about workforce, because workforce today is going to change. So the needs of the country is going to change. You're not going to have the same workforce needs, and and really understanding that from a local and a state, a local and a federal perspective is, how do we shift and how do we change that, and how do we make sure that there's the right amount of jobs with the right amount of education and skilling up our our country here. So I think there's a lot of changes. It's hard to predict, but you know, from our grocery side, the retail side, yeah, it's totally changed for us. We would never, you know, have just imagined what COVID has done to our industry and to our business, and how we have to pivot and really stay on the cutting edge.
Rita, quick follow-up. Are you talking internally about the consumer shift, perhaps out of the traditional, I'm going to take my wife and children out to a restaurant, and what impact that may have? And what are you projecting for that? Is that a 6-month process, or is that as far as the eye can see? Have you been discussing that at Kroger?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. You know, we're seeing, you know, the whole food industry is $1 billion industry, whether you eat at a restaurant and you pick up at a grocery store. But I feel like, you know, us as a society, we are, you know, we're humans, and we like to interact, we like the socialization. So I think that it will get back to a normal, but it'll be a different normal. I don't think people could stay home. You know, all of us are, we opened up this discussion on how are we staying sane, and, you know, staying sane is being out and being social and going back to restaurants. So I think it's going to shift a little bit. It's going to take time. It's going to take time for people to trust and really open up the economy back.
Yeah, thank you. Rob, what do you think the market looks like once we stabilize?
So I'm not even remotely smart enough to tell you where the world is going. My perspective is limited to industrial real estate, and I will tell you that, you know, I said the word uncertainty earlier on, and I'm going to say it again. A lot of what we're seeing today is uncertainty. Sellers and buyers can't seem to agree on prices. They're reluctant to sell. They're reluctant to put capital out. Tenants are reluctant to some degree to commit to long-term deals. And so I think until that uncertainty, you know, whether that's a vaccine or whether things are lifted and the world goes back to normal, I'm not smart enough to know what's going to fix all this, but until that uncertainty is removed, I think this sort of transaction reduced volume that we're currently in right now will certainly continue for the next, my guess, and this is a guess, is somewhere between 6 to 12 months. Hopefully by summer 2021, the world is back to normal. Where I do stay wildly optimistic is the same tailwinds that Blackstone took a bet on, e-commerce, the industrial food group as a whole. None of that has changed. The move to the whole distribution trend, it hasn't changed. And I think the COVID pandemic has only amplified it. I mean, Rita mentioned sales, online sales were up by 20%. That just means more distribution buildings. If Jamie and her group decide they want to increase inventory levels by 5 to 10%, the astronomical percentage of square footage across the country that translates to only means great things for industrial. I hear the word onshoring. I haven't seen it happen just yet. You're certainly hearing about it. I haven't seen it materialize yet, but I think there's a near-term uncertainty that's going to result in decreased transaction volume, both leasing and sales. But in the long term, I think as an industrial product type, we're going to come out of this even stronger than we went in.
Oh, that's great. Tricia?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this with both of my hats, if that's okay, Jeff. And my economic development one builds off of really what Rob was saying. And I think what we've heard, or I've heard from my partners in the economic development field, is that there's a real opportunity for some of that, the FDI, especially if there are existing operations here in Wisconsin or in the Midwest, and they want to shift production to increase US, or if there's additional components in their supply chain that aren't currently being manufactured here, that they may be looking to establish operations to be able to accommodate that increased capacity. So, you know, looking ahead, I think that's something to be looking out for. From a construction side, really ties to what Rita was saying on the technology piece of it. I think right now, you know, having that trust in your construction partner and being just that, an actual true valued partner is important. But also thinking about how are they going to need to operate, whether it's just this next 12-month project or down the road. And, you know, how are we preparing our workforce, our crews and our guys to be able to, you know, incorporate technology into the process, whether it's the laser scanning or the modeling, even use of drones or doing virtual inspections, things like that. I think will become even more so as, we've all been adding that over the past couple of years, but I think that's going to be, almost a necessity at this point too.
No, that's great. So we've got a couple of minutes left here. There are a couple of questions that filtered in. This one is going to be specific to Rita. Is the success of grocery delivery likely to impact the need for the same number of brick and mortar retail stores?
Yeah, so we see the grocery delivery really as a complement to our brick and mortar stores. We have announced that as we unfold our ecosystem and our seamless, this is just going to be enhancing the existing brick and mortar. It's just another option of how our customers receive their groceries.
Okay, this is to any speaker that has an opinion on this. Are there specific type of industrial buildings? So this would probably be more towards Jamie and Rita, but Tricia and Rob, please chime in if you think of anything from what you're dealing with your clients or what you'd invest in. Are there specific industrial product types that are missing from the market currently, or geographic areas that don't have the spaces or requirements that you're looking for? Anybody's got an opinion on that?
I guess I'll go back to what I had mentioned earlier, that on my side of the fence, I mean, we're heavily into the food and dairy industry specifically. That includes both dry and ambient space and cooler freezer, but I think it's still the market that I see the biggest need in right now that's not being met is in the freezer space. We get calls about freezer space all the time, and it just hasn't quite been one area where we've invested, but it's something that we're actively looking at. And I think to me, that's probably the biggest thing that's needed. And as far as a specific geography, I want to say it's fairly widespread. I mean, and that goes for, all of North America and Canada. We've got some Canadian customers too that have been asking quite a bit for some freezer capacity. So that, to me, that's kind of the big area that's unmet right now.
Anybody else with a comment?
If I tell you where Blackstone's going to put their money next, Jeff, I go missing, and my kids, and you're going to have to raise my kids.
I've read Steven Schwartzman's book, so I believe it.
Yeah, and I can just compliment that, Jamie, as you look at the geographic and where we're looking to continuously build our current network and our fulfillment networks, there are some challenges of space and what's available and really where we want to operate. So they're always gonna have those challenges.
Okay, I've got one last question for each panelist. Assuming that your local economy opened up tonight, would you go to your favorite restaurant, your favorite professional sports team, favorite concert, or would you say it's too risky, I'm staying home? Let's start with Jamie.
I would probably go to a sporting event. So my husband and I were pretty bummed when the Bucs season, I mean, we were looking so good, so we were pretty bummed that the Bucs couldn't finish their season and that we couldn't watch some baseball coming into the spring and summer. So we would probably do a sporting event.
Rita.
Yeah, so I would probably say concert. That'd be the first place I would go. I look at the music and the talent of so many of these artists out there that can't actually present, and I would probably go to a concert to support them.
Tricia.
We would probably go down to our local brew pub sports bar and watch the Brewers play on TV.
Rob.
Summertime in Chicago is around the corner, Jeff. I'm at a restaurant having about 75 beers outside.
See, there's a need for restaurants.
I've never been I like going to concerts, never been a huge concert person, but just something about it right now sounds so incredible. So I'd go to the concert. But the good news is here, out of the five of us, we all said we'd go out and do something as opposed to stay home. So that's the optimism. So that's great. We are up on time here. I can't thank the panel enough for carving some time out of their calendar and accommodating the new world, hopefully temporary world we live in of video conferencing. To summarize, industrial real estate, if you had any preconceived notions going in, that's the spot to be in. This has been a very encouraging chat. There's stuff happening out there. It's not all doom and gloom. And in particular segments, especially in the food side, it is a dynamic, transformational time. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you very much to our sponsors for sticking with us. And we are going to be excited when we have the 3rd annual signature SIOR Wisconsin event next spring, hopefully back at Good City Brewing with a Bucks game to follow. So thank you, and stay safe and enjoy the summer.